Thank you very much. I think this is my second time speaking in front of the Rotary Club. The first time I did, I was subject to a number of attack logs in Washington D.C. Based on my position, just for one comment, which I said when the military buildup was looking at Guam and Northern Mariana Islands. The island of Pagan was a linchpin into the decision of what type of buildup was going to be built in Guam. And is it going to be pressure gauge, pressure valve release for what was happening in Okinawa, or were they really looking at a permanent expansion into our region and moving forward? So I'm hoping that this time I don't have any blog attack coming in from DC, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. For those that don't know me, I'm married to Ramona Jones. So Ken Jones was my father-in-law and my second father, if you ask me. I feel privileged for my in-laws. They always complain that people that they don't like their in-laws. I love my in-laws, and I live with my mother-in-law. She asked us to move in when my father-in-law passed away, and so we share the house. She's building a new floor, but she decided that she needed a little bit more distance from us. I have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, so that sort of encompassed me in realizing I know nothing of electronics. Everything I thought I did was wrong. And I'm old-fashioned because I use Facebook, and Facebook should be thrown away. For those that don't know me, what do? I used to be a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. I did that for 16 years. I was part of the Bush administration. I was appointed as the Special Counsel for Immigration-Related Unfair Employment Practice, so I oversaw the I-9 form that you all fill out, and I oversaw the National Origin Discrimination Working Group. So after September 11, we created a working group to make sure that we went after every person that committed an attack against people because of their origin, and the Sikh community suffer a lot, as well as a lot of the Asian community. We're seeing a resurgence now of those concerns with the Asian community across the United States. And if you look what's interesting is the attack was sort of purported towards was blamed on some of the Republicans, but the majority of attacks are in Democratic cities. Sort of interesting to see. Nationwide, I am running the coalitions for the National Republican Party, so that gets me involved in DC. I'm a member of the board of the President's Export Council, so that takes me to DC also. And I'm one of the 3 trustees for the Puerto Rico Conservation Trust, which is appointed by the Secretary of Interior and the Governor of Puerto Rico. And we oversee 33% of the island of Puerto Rico as a natural conservancy and historic preservation. So that sort of gives you sort of my national background. Locally, I'm the treasurer for the Catholic Social Services. I'm a board member at the Guam Chamber of Commerce with a number of the folks here. And somebody left a phone that's ringing here. And I'm the chairman of the Republican Party, so that takes most of my time, so I have no time to join any other organization. I'm like capped for now. I'm also a member of GUASA, the Guam USA's Strategic Alliance on Defense and National Security. So that takes me. Why am I speaking to you today? It's because I did join one more group. I joined the Guam Beekeepers Association, and we have one of our senior members here with us, who you might take his staff. One of the founders of the group, and only master beekeeper in Guam. Is that correct?
Still correct.
Yeah. So I did think that it was, as we look at diversifying the economy in Guam and looking at new alternatives, economic alternatives, we need to think out of the box, and we need to start looking at different options. And one thing that I thought was very interesting is that I expected everybody would be looking at me talking about Democrats, and there's a lot to say about Democrats, but I thought I would start first talking about not these, but bees, and the bees in Guam. as few people know in Guam, beekeepers used to be around 7 on island, up to 5 years ago. Now we're over 50 beekeepers in Guam. And we sort of created sort of an anomaly in Guam because the laws are not set for beekeepers. They're set for ranch farmers, and they're set for agricultural farmers. So right now, if you're certified as a farmer because you have a beehive, there's no limit on the number of beehives you have to be certified as a farmer. If you are cattle rancher, you need 100 head of cattle. If you have a chicken farmer, you need 100 chickens and to be able to be qualified. But if you're a beekeeper, you need 1 beehive. And why would you want to be certified as an apiary, as a beekeeper? Is because then your property where you have your beehives is considered a farm, so then you don't have to pay taxes on your property. And because now you're a farm, you can qualify for the farm water bill, so that you have a farm water meter for your property. So it's sort of interesting, it's evolving, and it'll be changing. It's one of the challenges now is you can have a beehive in a condominium, right? You can have it in the balcony of your house. Would that mean that the entire condominium is now farmland? It's a farm, so it's a lot of questions coming up, decisions. It'll be changed. Federal government requires at least 8 beehives to be certified as a legitimate apiary, and things will move. But I focus on bee because, one, I love honey, and I think it's a product that we can produce here very easily and high quality on it. But more importantly, right now worldwide there's an epidemic going on, and bees are dying across the entire world. And the main issue they're dying is it's a mite. It's a little mite that goes in, and when you open a beehive in the mainland United States, and you open the thing, you will see this mite all over the place, and it's literally killing the bees. The bees in Guam don't have that mite for whatever reason. We don't know yet. It's being studied right now. They seem to be immune to the mite. If that ends up being correct and it's proven, queens for Guam will be the most desired queens in the entire world. And then you're really looking.
They already are. Just ask my wife.
And then you're really looking at a real industry coming on island that can be achieved with what we have. And it is interesting. It is different. But the reason I bring it up is because as we deal with COVID and the reality of our new realities of our world, we really need to be thinking outside of the box about which are the biggest advantage that Guam has to offer and benefits, in addition to the most beautiful sun and beaches that I've ever seen in any other part of the world.
Beautiful beaches.
So with that in mind, is my first comment to you all is we need to be imaginative and looking at it. That brings me to the COVID funding that we're getting now, and where we are looking at ourselves and our future. I've been a very strong advocate in both the chamber and of the Republican Party that we've gone to a crossroad right now. We need to make a decision on this island. Are we going to stay as a tourist destination? Is that going to be our future? And it's true, we can look at diversifying, but as we look at diversifying our economy, the first step is, are we going to still do tourism? I feel the answer is absolutely yes. You know, that's our strongest asset. Well, if we're going to be doing that, we need to live with the reality that COVID is going to come back on island. And what we need to do now is figure out how we use the funds that are being allocated by the federal government, lucky enough to have from the federal government, into a way that will protect the local community from any future attack of COVID as it comes in, and minimize the impact on our island as an economy. So that's where I would like to see those benefits coming in. I am not in power. The governor is in power. The Democratic administration in the legislature is also So we'll see how things evolve and move. I'll just give you sort of my 2 cents where the funds are coming and where things are happening, and some of the efforts that we've been able to do in DC. As they stated, I've been 5 months in DC. Most of that time was making sure that the transition documents that came in from the Republican administration of President Trump reflected key issues of importance for Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. The second part of it was trying to start advocating with the Senate and the House to make sure that we could work on a bipartisan way with Congressman San Nicolas on getting those problems resolved. And in the $1.9 trillion package that just came out, a lot of people have talked about the $661 million that are coming to Guam and how much money that is. Yeah, every state got over $2 billion. What the territories got was the same that one state would get. The shift that happened had nothing to do with locally. It had to do with, for the first time in a long time, we were able to get the Republican representatives and Democratic representatives of the territories to come together and go into the House and say, instead of dividing the money just by population, which is what they've done every single time, when you do it just by population, Puerto Rico gets 70-80% of the money because they have 3.5 million people. So by the time that the money trickles to the other territories, it's not enough. But in this one, we were able to achieve that 50% of the money was divided evenly between all the territories. So every territory got $500 million. And then the other half of the money that was given to the territories was done by population. So in the case of Guam, that gave us $61 million extra. Well, actually, $161 million extra. Northern Mariana Islands got $500 million, the first base, and then $51 million on top of that. So when we compare, we have 3 times the population of the Northern Mariana Islands, but we only got $100 million more than they did. And it's still, because the formula is still unfair, we need to still work on it. But it's good and important that we start looking at where the funding comes. The other efforts was trying to address the inequities of the past that we had been facing through the years, that we were able to put in the transition document, so it brought the Democratic members into a situation where they could not say they were unaware of it. So we got the earned income tax credit, EITC. So starting next year, the federal government's going to pay the ERTC, and that's going to be from now on. So they will refund the local government for any money that they spend on covering EITC. That's over $60 million a year, in addition for the local treasury of Guam, moving on forward. I feel that was a great gain. We got the child tax credit to be put in parity with the states. And that one also will be refunded to the local government. So now couples will get, if you have a child younger than 16 and you qualify, you will get $2,000 per child. And if it's older, they're going to give you $3,000 per child, which is great in our efforts. But our main focus was trying to look at all these long-term inequities and try to address them one by one. We haven't been able to achieve all of the goals that we're trying to work on eliminating. We still have the problem of Head Note 3A, which, if we're really serious about changing and diversifying our economy, we need to look at manufacturing and production here. And right now, that Head Note says that in order for a product made in Guam to be considered made in the U.S., and that allows it to have free access into the U.S. market, right? 70% of the value of that product needs to be made in Guam. 70. In the case of Northern Mariana Islands, Head Note 3S says 50. In the case of any of the 50 states of the United States, that number is 30. So we've been discriminated, and our manufacturing industry has been stifled because we cannot claim a product to be made in the U.S. to export to the United States. Second inequity that we really need to be looking at right now is that during the Obama administration, they were looking at doing the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. When we were looking at the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the Obama administration made a decision that the way that we're going to do it is that we're going to go into create a bilateral agreement with the individual country that they were addressing. Because overall there were too much difference. So the Korea wanted to protect their car industry. Australia wanted to protect their sugar industry. Japan wanted to protect their car industry, but as also their energy production and nuclear efforts. So they decided to split it up and start doing agreements independently with each of these countries. In all of those agreements, and I'm talking about Philippines, bilateral, Singapore, Singapore, Korea, South Korea, and Japan, Mexico, Canada, Chile, and among some of the other Pacific countries. All of those agreements that were made in anticipation of doing the TPP defines the United States as not including Guam or the Northern Mariana Islands. It excluded all three territories. So now that agreement would have created the largest non-continuous commerce zone in the world. So traffic between all those countries in that region, all the way from Japan and Korea, all the way to the mainland United States, if you did not break the chain of transit, you would not have to do any new paperwork. If U.S. Customs, let's say in Japan, Department of Agriculture certified a product as being safe, it didn't have to be reopened by U.S. Customs when it got to the United States. And vice versa. So it accelerates trades, diminishes the cost of transaction, and allows small business to be able to access, to buy directly from all these countries, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore. Here's the problem. Because we were not part of that, of any of those agreements, if they would have passed the TPP, if any ship landed in Guam, it would have then be subject to have broken the chain in transit, and then those containers would have to now go through the old paperwork. So that agreement did not pass. Finally was defeated. Now, unfortunately, we're left with the remnants of it. And the remnants is that all the free trade agreements for our region exclude Guam. First product in Guam came out last year. Somebody got an order from a Japanese companies to start exporting their Guam-made product back into Japan stores. Everything got ready, the order got made, the product was manufactured. When they started to ship, they got a notice. We got to cancel the order. I said, why? Because I just got informed that I need to fill all these other forms, and the tax subsidies and breaks that qualify for trading with the United States don't apply to you. So that local manufacturer had to basically eat the product because they couldn't do that. I still remember we had a delegation from Guam go to Korea, led by Madeline Bordallo when she was still congressman, because they had just signed a bilateral agreement with Korea. What was the problem? They landed there and they said, you're not part of the agreement. You want me to? Okay, I'll get out of.
I'll follow you. I don't think they can hear you.
Yeah.
I heard it fine. Come on.
So for us is we need to be smart as we're looking at these inequities. I've approached, and other people have approached the U.S. Trade Representative's office to address, wait a second, why did you exclude us from all these free trade agreements if we're the closest part of the United States to be in it? They said they estimated that because Guam is outside of the U.S. customs zone, that we could enter into a better agreement that the United States could do themselves. And we said, oh, that's great. So can I tell the governor to go to the Philippines and start negotiating their new agreement? And they said, no. It's the U.S. Trade Representative is the only person allowed to enter into international agreement for the territories. So, and I said, then when are you going to do it? Oh, when we find time. Well, that's not good enough. I think when you're stymieing an economy like ours and not allowing the manufacturing to actually work, and you can't allow that to continue. When you have companies trying to look and making Guam into consider where it should be a transshipment port for U.S. good that would be under the protections of U.S. laws and standards, and we're strategically located close to all the Asian market, we would be great for it. But no one's going to do it if we cannot enter those goods, if those goods are penalized. You can create as many free trade zones as you want. You can give as many local incentives as you want. It's not going to happen. So we need to focus and address our efforts in looking at those larger picture issues. The second one for me is saying it's not good enough that you divide what you normally give to a state by 5 and then say that's good enough for Guam. And I say Trump is, I'm a big Trump supporter. I like a lot of what he did. He's not my best friend. I don't hang out with him and have coffee every other day. But I'll tell you one thing that he really shined in. Every section of every bill that came in to do assistance for the recovery, he treated the territories as a state. And you look at it, every single piece of the legislation, it'll come in and says, state is the 50 states plus the 5 territories. And we're starting in the Biden administration, and we're facing an issue that we need to keep our voice heard and loud. They did their first, and I'm monitoring, but I can't be everywhere. And I'll give you an example. I'm monitoring SBA, Small Business Administration. Already I have a number of issues that have come up that are concerning to me. The new administrator, I would say 80% of the people that are coming into the Biden administration were all Obama administration folks. And you got to remember, Obama was the administration that took us out of those definitions. So what's the first thing they do at SBA? They do what's called a shutter venue owner grant. It's a new portal. It's about for people that do shows and movie theaters that have been shuttered because of COVID. They couldn't perform. It's a lot of our ethnic dancers, so we're trying to get a lot of the local folks to apply. Jimmy Dean's would be an owner. Baldiga would be an owner. And all the movie theaters here would qualify for this grant. When they did the first portal for you to register to get information about the grant, you know what? When you hit the tab for state, it said 50 states and other. Not Guam, not Puerto Rico, not the Virgin Islands, not American Samoa, other, and that is the meaning to me, why would they do that? You had to order that change because the programs that they had all included all 5 territories. Biden has said he wants to make Puerto Rico a state. But funding came in for the funding bill, $1.9 trillion. D.C. got the same as every state of the nation. They said because we want to make them a state. Puerto Rico? No, they got piled into with the other territories to divide the money. So where's the intention? Where's this going? Now you'll say, well, maybe that was a mistake. It was done unintentionally. There's an other grant that maybe some of you took. EIDL grant. It was an option to the PPP. They said the first $10,000 is basically a gift. We'll give to everybody. Then they realized they were running out of money. Under the Trump administration, the determination you qualify and the amount you got was made based on the number of employees you had. So no matter where you were, if you had two employees and you had suffered, you qualified. All of Guam qualified. All of the 5 territories qualified. Well, through the $1.9 trillion grant, they came in and said, we want to try to bring the money back so we can complete the 10,000 that we promised everybody we're going to give them. So the money's there, but the SBA now came in and said they're going to tie whether you qualify or not for that money to the 2010 census for underserved communities. Half of Guam doesn't qualify. So if you're in Telefofo, if you're in Tamuning,
you're in Gigo, if you're in almost any part of the south of this island, they decided that our economic situation is too good to receive the money, and that's not right. That makes absolutely no sense. There was no COVID in 2010. Why would you tie that into what happened into the economic standing in 2010? You should be tying that in to the reality of 2019 and 2020 that we're all suffering through. So we're bringing these things up. I'm glad to say that the first one, SBA already informed us that they will. We got Senator Markowski to send a letter. We got Congressman San Nicolas to inform the committee, and insult to injury, the chairman of the SBA Oversight Committee is Nidia Velasquez, who's from Puerto Rico. So SBA has come back and said, oh, we're going to amend it and we're going to change it. We're going to bring the territories back into our form, which I think is good to see. But it still doesn't address the fact that they were requesting that they're taking half of our island off from receiving benefits from this other grant program, and even on the grant for the shorter venue grant, they're requiring a tax form to be attached to everything that is not done in the territories. It's a tax form that it was created to allow IRS to receive their taxes from. To give their taxes directly to SBA so they can make sure that you're not lying. Now, we brought to their attention that none of the territories file federal taxes with the IRS, that form is not going to be there. And originally we were told, don't worry about it, we understand that. But in the last video that they did to the applications, which are due on the 8th, they said, in the case of Puerto Rico, not any other territory, they just mentioned Puerto Rico, you need to fill the form and then we'll ask for additional information. But if you fill that form wrong, or they don't feel that form is complete, they've already stated they will not look at your grant. There's only $17 billion in that grant program, and our expectation is it'll be done in the first week. Because that includes Hollywood, it includes all of Hawaii entertainment industry, and includes all of Florida, Disney, and Universal. So that's some of our bigger concerns. The other issues that we're monitoring that are also concerning for me is a lot of the stuff that's put in this bill are things that people are not looking at. And there's a lot of grant opportunities, and I'm going to try to make sure that Guam's aware of a lot of the opportunities that are out there for programs. There's a lot for farmers. It's going to be brought in there. Restaurant and hotel owners, because they realized finally that those industries were the ones that were affected the most. But at the same time, they put requirements that we were never expecting. In this new shutter venue grant, and I mentioned that because the deadline is coming and I want to make sure that Guam companies apply. Originally it was $15 billion for that program. And then they added like $2.5 or $3 billion in that $1.9 trillion package, and we're going like, why the additional money? But it's okay, let's get it and let's look at it. Then we find out they put a pro-union requirement now on every money on the $1.9 trillion. So if you accept any of the new money that's going to come in on the 1.9 trillion, you need to guarantee in the shorter venue alone that for 2 years you will remain neutral on any union effort on your company. So you cannot campaign against it. You cannot explain to your employees the realities of what that might be to your business, because you took this money. And if you don't take it, if you take it and you do, they'll not only fine you, they will not only take your money away, they also will include a fine. So it's a lot of the fine print. We're working through it. We're looking at it, and I think I've talked too much, and I'm glad to accept it. Hear any questions you might have. I did not even touch the $2 trillion that are coming out on infrastructure, but that will be the last package. Come September of this year, that will be the last unemployment funding that's coming to Island, and then there's going to be a reality check on our people. whether we got our businesses running or not. Because if we don't have our businesses back in operation and we're not being able to attract our tourism back on island, there's going to be a lot of really sad people.
Right, quickly, you're bringing up a lot of good stuff, very interesting stuff that we're not aware of. Now, my question is, why is the Lone Ranger doing this? Why isn't there an organization that thinks exactly like you do and concerned about these kind of shortcomings that are happening in our nation and our territory? Are you the only one who's actually monitoring this thing? And are you the only one who's actually doing something about it?
Yeah. I will have to say I'm the chairman of the Republican Party, so I manage. But we've been able to work very well, at least to a degree, bipartisanly with Congressman San Nicolas. The new chairman of the Democratic Party says that she wanted to try to see if we could work on some of these efforts together. We've been a little bit not as successful with the present administration. Outside of former Governor Gutierrez, who really has had an effort to try to do that.
Your point with EIDL,
Yes.
Literally that email came in today in my inbox, and it said, the other one, the 10,000 grant,
Yeah.
where you didn't get all of it last year. And you go through the whole thing, and it says you have to meet all these criteria, right? And then you have to be in a low income community zone.
Yeah.
They give you a little link to show you if you are in that zone. Like the entire island's not on it, so
Yeah.
so it's like, you're right. It's like,
And it doesn't make sense. It's why would you tie that to realities of 2010 when COVID was not even in the picture, and this is a COVID relief package.
right.
But we need the support. We need the governor. We need the congressman. We need the legislature to all come together and say, this is wrong, and you should not do that. And we're working on it. We're open for, I'm open to all. I believe we all live in this one island, and once the governor is elected, it's our governor. We might think that somebody else could be a better governor, but we need to figure out how we can move together on issues. And I hope at some point our efforts will be taken.
You're absolutely right. And I think by the time we decide to mix up and say, let's put politics up beside it, when it's a bigger picture and let it for the whole island, that's making a difference what the
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. I follow the economy, which is my biggest downside. Is the U.S. has printed more money in the last 3 years than it had ever printed in its entire life, and it is based on one premise and one premise alone: that the U.S. dollar will remain strong because it's the only viable international currency for trade. So everybody does contracts, they're all doing it based on the US dollar. They felt that the yuan was too unstable because it had too much control from China. They felt that the euro, when Great Britain left, was no longer a viable alternative. So they printed all this cash based on that perception. Maybe 2 months ago, the first international trade started happening in cryptocurrency. And major institutions are saying they will accept cryptocurrency for international trade. China last week launched a cryptocurrency of their own. And don't be surprised if when you guys do your next buy of products and things from China, guess what currency they're going to ask you to peg the trade with? It's going to be with their cryptocurrency. As that happens, the demand for the US dollar diminishes worldwide, and then the value of the dollar diminishes. And then where are we going to be? That for me was a scary game. I don't want to fear monger people. It's a long-term game, but we need to sort of realize what's happening and figure out how to manage to get the U.S. back in the right direction.
On your the customs issue, right, about
Yes.
Guam being outside the U.S. customs zone, why is that? Why hasn't Guam stood up and said, if you look at the budget for Guam customs and our use taxes, what they collect, it's nothing. If we were to say, hey, make Guam, the island, a U.S. customs zone,
Wouldn't that solve a lot of the problems? And the U.S. Customs then would have to fund, inspections of ships coming in and all of that stuff.
Yes, it would, but there's some positives and negatives. So being control when all this tariff war was going on with the mainland United States, we were sort of a little escape valve. Like the U.S. said, if you do your trades through Guam, then none of this tariff issues apply. And then you can tranship your goods from Guam to the mainland United States. And there was some movement that happened internationally there, not that much, but it is an advantage. And if we're looking at diversifying our economy, I look at pharma. Pharma is a real viable. Right now, the United States has said that they can no longer afford to keep 95% of all the pharmaceuticals to be manufactured outside of the U.S. There's a goal of 35% of the pharmaceuticals in the mainland United States, in the U.S., should come from the U.S. So they're going to have to move those pharmaceutical facilities into the States. There's been a push to look at the territories to be the place to do that. Puerto Rico used to have 75 pharmaceuticals. So they are looking at activating that. But you know where the number 1 and number 2 generic manufacturers in the world are?
India.
India and the Philippines. India and the Philippines. For pharmaceutical drugs. It's India and the Philippines.
Generics.
So they do the generics. So how hard would it be to tell one of those manufacturers, look, there's going to be a quota imposed on you. They're going to start cutting down the ability for those generics to come in. If you move some of that manufacturing to Guam, then that product would be exempt from that, and then you can go into the U.S. market as a generic product, and you're not going to find at lower wage that you're going to find between Guam and Northern Mariana Islands. So you should be looking at us. Second of all, same time zone, you don't have to be worrying about where you're going to be calling and the distance. And really quick and short shipping links between the two countries. What's the one problem there? We're not in the free trade agreement.
But we already have a robust drug networking, trafficking network set up on Guam.
Yeah.
Contact the mayor.
We're good at trading
Yeah.
drugs.
We've been hearing about the SBA, but what about USDA? I know that they've been very good to us out here in some cases, and they've had a long time person in there that's been a good advocate for us, Joseph Ben Israel.
Yes.
And so why don't we push a lot more through the USDA?
Okay, part of it is because Congress will determine where the programs go. And right now, one of the biggest programs that they have is the Congress gave most of the COVID money to the disaster recovery areas. So who normally does disaster recovery? Which after every typhoon? FEMA and SBA. So the bulk of the money will flow through those institutions. The concern was they gave the money not just to Small Business Administration, they gave it to SBA disaster program. That office doesn't do grants. They've never done grants. In every typhoon we get, what do you get from SBA? You get a loan, right? They offered you a low interest loan. Well, their portals were not set up to accept grants. And the difference is when you do a loan, the documents you require are different. If there's a congressman or a senator or a governor supporting the things, there's no line that says, my loan is being supported by this congressman. That's more like a grant-related issue. So they had to create everything from scratch. So that slowed the entire program on. USDA has traditionally treated the territories better, particularly the Rural Development Agency. There is a ton of money that is being assigned to that. I can forward some of the numbers. I have them here, but I don't want to.
What I wanted to add is, I know that when we had the population census done in 2010, that Dedido was already outside of the max size for USDA district. So we cut it up so that we could put all of Guam into USDA qualification.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously that memo didn't transfer over to the SBA,
Yeah.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And
What is it, North Dedido, South Dedido now, or
It's East Dedido and
Little China.
East Dedido?
the other issue that for me brings a little bit of concern is the Biden administration came out after they did the the $1 trillion plan, and they're doing it again for the $2 trillion infrastructure plan. They came up with a list. It looks like this, right? They go, these are all the states, right? How much money each state's getting and how it impacts them and how it looks, and it's 3 pages of that. No territory again. So as far as the White House was concerned and showing what the impact, they even had it divided into Asian Pacifics and African Americans and the benefits for all the subgroups. But I keep pointing to them going like, but you forgot like 5 states.
To that point, I understand some of the territories, maybe they don't get looked at hard, but Guam being a military base, with the tip of the spear, all that good stuff we hear, why does it get so underwhelmed with attention when it comes to like supporting the local side outside the fence? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So DOD supports us, right? And let me tell you, you want to have an advocate in D.C. DOD is one of the best to have. But you also need to try to understand what they can do and they cannot do. The federal government's not a monolithic government, even though people believe it is. All the different agencies are like little fiefdom. And if you have a strong White House with a strong intergovernmental affairs division that cares, they can try to control. But if you do not, and right now there's almost no cabinet member appointed. So when you're looking, all these agencies are like running on their own. There's really a lack of control.
Running the kindergarten.
Well, and I was talking to a high-ranking a friend of mine that's a big lobbyist on the Democratic side, and he said, "Well, Carlos, you need to understand. We didn't focus on the Senate confirmed appointments because we don't have enough of a leadership of a shift there that we felt that our radical people would be allowed to go through. So what we've done is appoint a lot of deputies that don't require Senate confirmation. So, but normally the people that will accept that deputy slot is a younger person who might not be as articulate or knowledge on how to address issues, and particularly in the territories, because we're not the #1 priority. DOD, Secretary of the Navy, is still going. We just had the best news for Guam. What could have happened was Admiral Aquilino got appointed to be the head of Pacific Command, right? Indo-Pacific Command, right? Aquilino, big fan of Guam. I think the Chamber of Commerce have met with him repeatedly. He supports a lot of the additional efforts to be done in Guam and understands the issue of the outside of the fence and inside the fence and Guam strategy. He had his hearing 2 weeks ago. You know who wrote a letter of endorsement? The Republican Party. The Republican Party. You would assume that the Democratic Party or the Democratic governor would have gone in. I would have loved to see our congressman testify in support of a nomination of a person that's going to be in charge of our entire region for the next at least 3 years. And you have to go step by step, and it's training. You know, the chamber is having a more active voice. Before they used to focus a lot just on the Department of Defense stuff. We're now really trying to expand that into other areas because it's the only way that we're going to survive.
Juan Carlos, could you talk to us a little bit about what's the grand plan for paying back all the debt?
There isn't it.
It's not our concern, it's our great grandchildren.
Somehow, sometime.
Yeah, they're not looking at it. I want to try to have people sort of understand. The governor says like everybody's conjecturing how she can use the 661 million, and Senate Governor Northern Mariana Islands is going to use the 551 million he got. They have a concern. I'll tell you the big concern that they have is the regulations haven't been drafted. They approved the money, they assigned the money to the agencies before the regulations were done. They gave them a real broad, it's almost, if you read the bill, it's almost like you can do almost anything you want with the money, except maybe 5 things. You cannot pay expenses that you would normally expected to cover, but anything extra you can cover that. And anything that was and you can spend it in anything that was impacted by COVID, right? So I'll give you an example. The airport originally got $20 million to retool the airport. They used the entire $20 million to pay salaries. And they said we needed to pay salaries because the salaries came from the visitors tax that came, or whatever came with the ticket tax, and saying no one's coming, there's no money, so it got impacted by COVID. We spend the money, right? The concern now is as we look at the regulations coming, they can say we're not going to pay for anything that's not gone through a bidding process. And then what do? We know that there's all these contracts that were awarded as emergency contracts without a bid, right? So where will that money come? And as you look into the different areas, or you spend it into an expense that you thought that it was going to be related, and then now they're telling you it's not. So based on that, to a certain degree, you need to slow down a little bit, find out what they're going to accept, and then move forward. Thank you.